Welcome to another session here on AWS On Air. We're at the DC Summit. I'm AM Grabelny, a solutions architect here at AWS and one of your hosts for the show. I'm joined by Brian, our ASL interpreter, and Kevin from Intel. Kevin, you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Am. That was great. My name's Kevin Fiftel. I'm managing director for Intel Federal. Work most of my time in Washington, D.C. I've spent over 15 years with Intel. Part of my success and Intel success is centered in security within the U.S. federal government and in our SLED teams. We have a very close alignment with NIST and the National Cyber Center of Excellence. I was Intel's first principal investigator there. I wrote the first cybersecurity use case out of the Executive Order 13636, which was the Obama cybersecurity. Made me famous in a very, very small circle. But I talk security all the time. I talk AWS all the time. Thanks for having me. I talk better together when I talk between AWS and Intel. It's a 15-year relationship, engineering relationship. So we're very pleased with our side of the relationship and our joint work.
Very cool. And I too, nowhere near your storied experience there. I too come from a bit of a cybersecurity background. I've worked at a cybersecurity company in the past. We're here to talk today. You gave me a great lead in here. We're going to talk about security, and we're going to
Sure.
talk about the federal government, right? And how
Right.
those two things come together, and how Intel and AWS comes together to deliver a very secure platform for the federal government to run workloads. Now, when you talk security, that's a huge space, right, Kevin?
It is
Massive,
absolutely right.
right? But we're going to talk about encryption, right?
We are.
Why is encryption important in a security posture for a company?
Right. So, particularly in the U.S. government, as you know, there's standards and guidelines that we have to live by. A lot of it called Federal Information Processing Standards, or FIPS. You need some compliance across those, et cetera. So whether we're with AWS talking to the intelligence community, to the DoD, or the civilian agencies, if we don't lead with security, it's a gap.
Yeah,
And the fact is that it's such a strength that we have together. And AWS has done such a great job on the overall cloud security, and with Intel on encryption, which we're going to talk about something called total memory encryption, or TME, today. It's really been better together. It is the story. AWS goes into great lengths on zero trust, et cetera, and they really have this story down as well as anyone we know as far as the U.S. government is concerned. So
that's
it's
great to
important.
hear. That's
Yeah.
really great to hear. Yeah, the total memory encryption aspect that you just brought up. We often think about encryption at rest, encryption in transit. I actually learned just a few minutes before this session of a term that Intel has called encryption in processing as well, right? And this
Yeah,
is vitally important to customers like the federal government. So
that's
at
right.
the chipset level, based on Intel's chipsets, you can actually encrypt data moving to the CPU. Is that right?
Right. Or, as you know, how encryption works, you have your different algorithms, and, there's a lot of different words that are very technical as far as that's concerned. But one of the things that needs to be embraced is, of course, the random number generator, or
Yes.
RNG. So that requires a great deal of compliance in what we call entropy, which is how random can you actually get. In what Intel has done, and been in a very secure embrace with AWS on, is essentially we do edge to cloud encryption. So from the edge devices, which used to be called IoT, the clients, the data centers, and now most importantly, the cloud, we provide a very secure environment for encryption that is data in motion, data at rest, wherever that data is, we need to provide the encryption. So we call that total memory encryption, or TME is how we brand that, AM.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true end-to-end encryption there. And encryption, is not necessarily always the easiest thing or top priority for every customer, but definitely is for the federal government. So, how are you all, and us approaching security that's specific to the U.S. government?
Right. So if you look at Intel as a whole, and we could talk, workload upon workload, we have about 240 instances within EC2. It's a very good relationship. Um, but within our third generation of Xeon processor, which we call Ice Lake, which was introduced in 2021, we came out with a lot of new capabilities, which is the advanced encryption standards. We call it new instruction set, or NI. And what that provides is the TME we talked about, total memory encryption, so that 40 of the instances that are within AWS at right now have this end-to-end encryption. We embrace what you're doing from Outposts all the way to your cloud, massive amount of different workloads, from compute intense to ingestion for big workloads like we've done together for NOAA. But security is at the key of everything that we do in the U.S. federal government. So that's how we're, better together in this particular issue. Ice Lake and beyond has really created these new instruction sets that allow for acceleration, which is really the number one thing we're focusing on now, to ensure that within the AWS workloads with your customers, we are optimizing them and accelerating them as much as possible. And that's what the new instruction set does.
It's like you're reading my mind a bit here, Kevin.
I'm trying. I can't quite do that. My mind is a little more random AM, but so be it.
You've got true randomness up in your brain. I like it.
We're trying. We're trying.
That's awesome. I actually was going to ask, what type of workloads do you see customers utilizing most with Ice Lake?
Sure. So Ice Lake, first, when you really look at both the DoD and IC, and you look at those two portions of the U.S. federal government, it's all about security. So some of the largest cloud contracts in the world right now are being decided for the U.S. federal government. What we're seeing in the encryption side alone, for instance, in our SHA work, with the new instruction set, we're getting 5x to 7x performance, which is great. But what we're seeing too, particularly in those two areas, we're seeing within SAP and large SQL environments, we're seeing, which do require encryption across them in many ways based on, as you know, the database side of it, that's where we're seeing just huge gains with you all. In fact, from the last generation, or generation 2, which is your older instances, we're seeing a 45 to 50% performance on SAP alone, as far as that workload is concerned. AM.
That's significant. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's important too when running workloads like SAP. Like getting performance out of that is often very significant and very substantial to a customer.
It is. So we call that the acceleration part of our workloads together, right? How do we take workloads and make them better at AWS? And one of those is what we're talking about today, is just that acceleration, the 5 to 7 times in just the SHA side of things, and 50% in SAP. When you talk to the massive workloads that we undertake together, that's where we have success.
Yeah, definitely. And encryption,
Yeah.
has always had a reputation of it's going to take away from your compute processing power, or
That's
things
right.
like that, and that's why you should avoid it, or things like that. And it's all false, obviously. Like it's and especially in the case of Intel and Ice Lake, it sounds like you're actually getting really great performance benefits here.
It is.
So,
Yeah.
great. I wanted to ask, where can I go learn about more customers that are using Ice Lake on AWS?
Yeah. So we actually have a couple sites. The AWS and Intel site has just some great information. I think you're all going to put that in a banner, across the bottom of this interview.
That's right.
But also the Intel newsroom, in the Intel and AWS site, you see those successes. What I like to cite, though, is that I was the first principal investigator at the National Cyber Center of Excellence. And AWS just came into that, several years ago, but they've embraced the big use cases coming out of that, like zero trust. So you look at where AWS is and Intel is side by side, as far as the standards and guidelines that are being developed out of the US government. AWS has just done a great embrace, and we're partners up there. We're, industry partners, not just from an engineering side at the headquarters location, but in the US federal government, we're seeing the resonance across our two organizations that really allow the partnerships to go far beyond just the engineering side, let alone our partner teams that work together. AM. So right
Yeah,
across the board. Yeah.
that's exciting. And I think those are some great references and resources to go explore. We've got the banner going down right below us, so
Sure.
please go visit. I'm going to wrap us up with a quote from one of my favorite people at AWS,
Yeah.
probably everyone's favorite person at AWS, Werner Vogel's "Encrypt everything," right,
That's
Kevin?
right.
Encrypt
End to
everything.
end, encrypt everything. And as we say, only the paranoid survive. Well, in encryption, that's true.
That's
That's
right.
Andy Grove. That's Andy Grove's statement. So,
I
AM,
love it.
that's what we're about as well. And I really appreciate the interview. I mean, you
Totally.
really picked up some key points. Obviously, you have a good technical background, but just the AWS and Intel relationship from every person I meet is just a great handshake. So we appreciate the relationship.
All right. Thank you. Me too. Thanks for
You
joining
too.
us, Kevin. It was wonderful to get the opportunity to talk with you. And like I said, encrypt everything. All right.
Thank you very much.
Stick around. We'll be back with more.